We beg you, as your fellow workers, not to receive the favour, that can also be translated the grace, charis, of God in vain. Over our heads right now, there is a cloud of grace. The Lord is trying to get through to each one here. He has a word, a grace, a touch for each soul, and you are all a universe apart, each with his or her set of problems, and the Lord is interested in them, very interested, more interested than you are, and better able to handle them, because he's got a little bit more experience. Remember that next time you cloud your day with a heavy worry. There are things that are worth worrying about, notably our eternal salvation. The rest, all the rest, in a sense, is relative. And so Lent is a time, apart from time, to make sure that that bit is looked after. If one is giving out the ashes in a full church, one is sometimes deeply moved to see all babes in the arms of their mothers, old people about to cross the frontier of eternity, all and all in between, coming out and being told, remember that you are dust, and unto dust you will return. Right now, a dear friend, my anointed just the other day, right now is being buried. Hugh. We didn't think it would go that way, but it did. And it's a sobering reminder that when in midlife one is called, one has to be ready. Praise God, he was. Praise God, we were able to do everything that might need to be doing at that point in full lucidity. And it's a great blessing and grace to have all the sacraments in full lucidity. But he was in any case ready to go because he was living for the Lord. There are others, my friends, and many others, who are not. And the Gospel reminds us of that truth. Do you know that there's nothing new under the sun? These types of temptation, these categories are still there. I just want to zoom into one this morning. It's that one of ambition, the pride of life, ownership, dominion. The Lord could have had another way, and the devil knew it, but he had to worship him. He is the prince of this world, and all these things are in his power. Now, look back over human history. Nothing new under the sun. I remember when studying classics, how there was a pattern emerging in all these empires. More! Alexander the Great, got as far as the Indus River, and the troops said, thus far and no further. Hannibal, he conquered the Alps with the elephants. He was a great general. But you know what killed him in the end? A little ring which he bore on his finger, rather like the Nazi generals who had cyanide, and that was the last resort. Many a great writer of history has ended up taking his own life. I was quite alarmed when I heard the voice of Hitler on tape after his death. Do you know why? In a case of exorcism in Germany, Anneliese, which unfortunately made headlines in Germany itself, it was so dramatic. There were human souls also from the beyond talking in her, and one was Hitler. It was happening, remember, in Germany. And we hear quite clearly in the Austrian accent was his, Ja, ich bin Hitler. And as I listened, it was though goose pimples came through my soul. You're listening to the other side. You're listening to one of the many who wrote history, but you're listening to the voice as it is. I remember being present at an exorcism in Italy, because a friend of mine was an exorcist, and when there, it was quite eerie. We were talking with the other side. The devil uses the voice box of his victim. The victim is just there, not in control, but the devil is. And he knows that he's on the losing side before the power of the priest. He knows that he hasn't got the last word. He can be a thorough nuisance, but he's a barking dog on a chain. Quando uscirai? When will you come out? Lo sai, you know it. A dialogue going on between the priest, exorcist, and the demon. And this was all happening a few inches before me. The other side, the frontier, very, very thin. Now these demons are not myths or fairy tales. They're real, intelligent beings. And it's rare that they manifest themselves directly. They don't need to. Do you know that there's a curious YouTube up on what an artist saw on the other side? It's a Korean artist, a young girl, who was shown the other side and shown where souls ended up and why. The categories of mortal sin are there, and one thing in it is curious. The amount of involvement of the demons through channels of various thoughts who get them there. And I was quite surprised to see how, for instance, the demons were coming out of screams. The demons were coming out of addictions. Do you know that when there is a shipment of drugs from Latin America, they call in a Satanist to curse it because it brings in more money. And so those who are involved in serious drugs are involved with serious demons. And exorcists know that too. There's stuff in there, and they're in bondage. But also, my friends, they're closer to home than we know. Every person involved in anything which is an open door, pornography, New Age practice, even the very fact of being in mortal sin and no prayer and no grace, is a wonderful field day for the demons who have no resistance. They're portals. And we are all the time rubbing shoulders with people who are rubbing shoulders with the other side and don't even know it. With regard to this particular one, it applies to each one of us. Usually, our ambition is not that dramatic, but it's there. Envy. Someone who has more success than we do. Beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster that mocks the one it feeds on. Shakespeare. Othello. Look at a person who's green with envy. He'll dig indirectly at the one who's getting further than he is. And it can ruin a life. Careerism. A secret is to sit on the moment that we have in the form that we have it, and then we're free. The person who's basing his joy on some chimere of a hope of glory is living an illusion and is his worst enemy. But there are consequences, my friends. I come back to when I started, exorcism. Do you know the devil, despite the fact that he's very much bonded with all his other fellow demons, is very much alone? It came out in an exorcism when I was in Italy. The exorcist commanded the devils to depart. And they answered, because he was requesting this specifically. All of you together, insieme, all of you together, depart! And they started to make a noise. We are never together. In other words, each demon is completely isolated in his loss. And that's what happens to a soul. If you say this, I go to hell, I'll have such and such my friend with me. Not a bit of it. Each one is completely isolated. And that can be detected already in this life. Because mortal sin isolates. Not only that, but there's a terrible solitude, a negative solitude, even among Christian souls, because people do not know how to break through and to meet the other. And that leaves them prey to another opening. I think you know what I mean. Let's look at it. How many here right now are able to get through in depth? It's a whole art. And many go through life, even married, even in community, and they're living in that isolation. Fellowship is no more. And right now, it's easily avoided because each one goes into his screen. Observe what's going on. Each alone. Terribly alone. The solitude of the desert, the solitude of the 40 days, is inhabited by angels and by encounter, and was chosen by the desert fathers because it favoured encounter with him. This Lent must be a time to take the risk, to be alone without contraptions, eye to eye, once with him, and let him beam into us the love that he has for us and the meaning that he has for our existence. For if we cannot do it in Lent, we'll end up on the other side, dust unto dust, ashes unto ashes, and for the first time ever meeting reality.